Hi, I'm Jourdan Bell with Texas A&M AgriLife Research and Extension, and we are back at the North Plains Groundwater Conservation District Water Conservation Center. It's been about a week and a half since we've been in this field, and since then our producer has sprayed for cotton flea hoppers. He used Biden at 3.2 ounces per acre. When we're talking about cotton flea hoppers during early squaring, that is something that we want to be very cognizant of because cotton flea hoppers can cause a yield loss. The cotton flea hopper can be found in the terminal of the plant, and depending on the time of the day, you'll have better success in looking for them. Usually early morning or later in the evening will be best. The cotton flea hopper does have piercing, sucking mouth parts, and so it does feed on very soft, young tissue. And where you do have flea hopper feeding, you'll actually see a blasted square. So on this plant, for example, we are getting slightly past pinhead square, and we have a good square. This is not a blasted square. However, if we had flea hopper damage, we would see where that would be blasted. So when scouting a field, we do want to make sure we're looking for both the adult and the nymph, and we also want to be checking to see if there's any feeding injury. Also in this field, we have initiated irrigation. And at the Water Conservation Center, we are looking at different irrigation strategies. We want to optimize irrigation in a corn-cotton rotation. And we do have producers in this region who want to optimize cotton production for both lint as well as quality. But we also have those that need to manage their water with their corn crop. And right now we have some fields that are approaching tasseling, and this is something that we've previously discussed. During tasseling, of course, we're reaching our peak water demand. With the heat we've seen across the high plains this week, we've seen our corn water demand range anywhere from 3/10 of an inch even up to 4/10 of an inch. And since we are at tasseling in some fields to R1 and silking, we want to make sure that we're not stressing that corn because we want to ensure pollination and good kernel set. And so considering the different irrigation strategies, we want to really decide when is going to be the best time to withhold irrigation on our cotton crop, and then of course to apply irrigation to that cotton crop. Research in the Southern High Plains by Texas A&M AgriLife Research has shown that actually withholding some early season irrigation and saving that for later in the season for our cotton crop does not yield any differently than actually irrigating uniformly throughout the season. So if we can adopt that same strategy in this region, we have the opportunity to conserve water as well as optimize the production for both crops. So also at this stage, previously we talked about our producer applying a plant growth regulator. And of course the use of plant growth regulators is to balance the vegetative and reproductive growth for the plant. So as we consider a PGR program, there are several things that we do want to be aware of. We want to be aware of the growth habitat of the variety that we are growing. Some varieties tend to be a little more vegetative, and so they're going to require a more aggressive PGR program, especially under irrigation. Whereas other varieties are not as aggressive vegetatively and tend to just be a smaller, more determinate variety. And so if those varieties are on limited water or especially on dry land, we might not want to be as aggressive with the PGR program, especially early in the season. Under limited water, if we go in too aggressively with an early PGR program, we can actually encourage that plant to go into early cutout. And that can actually be detrimental because cutout is that period where we're actually looking for 5 nodes above the white flower. While at this stage we have not started to bloom yet, we still do not want to inhibit growth early in the season so that we inhibit the potential fruiting sites later in the season. So as we're looking at actual PGR application timing and what we're going to do, we want to know the variety. We also want to consider what is going to be the irrigation regime on the field, as well as some knowledge about the soil moisture. We do know that we had very good soil moisture. However, our surface soil is already drying out very quickly. As I mentioned, our producer has initiated irrigation with the drip system on this field, on half of it, so that we can evaluate different irrigation timings. When we consider the PGR, we want to consider a couple of things in addition to the variety and the irrigation. Looking at the plant height can be very beneficial. So just getting an average of the height of the plant to the terminal, we can see that, for example, on this plant, we're looking at a plant that's about 14 inches tall. And evaluating the height to the node ratio will actually give us an indication of the vigor of the plant. So if we count the number of nodes moving up from our cotyledon nodes, which would be 0, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 nodes on this plant. So 14 inches divided by 11, we're looking at a height to node ratio of about 1.3. And when we reach a height to node ratio 1.3 and moving up, we know that we have a plant that is actively growing, it's not stressed, and we're really setting up for a very good yield potential. So this is a crop that we do want to monitor and make sure that it does not get out of control. We also want to look at the internode distance. And that internode distance is going to be the distance between two nodes, especially between the 4th and 5th nodes. And on this plant, we see that we have an internode distance just a little over 1 inch, about 1.5 inches. And so this is a plant that has not gotten too out of control. Usually when we reach an internode distance of greater than 2.5 to 3 inches, that's when we know that we're starting to get a little rank in our growth. And it's always important to keep in mind, though, with PGR applications that PGRs are not going to turn back time. PGRs need to be applied in advance so that we can actually control growth moving forward. Also, when we think about just controlling the growth, that boll load is going to be the best PGR that we have. So we do want to make sure that we are managing our crops so that we can optimize the boll load. We can be managing those insects, we manage our irrigation program so that the crop is not stressed and does not drop bolls. The better the boll load, the better the growth control will be in the field. So in this field, our reproductive development is progressing very nicely. We can see that we're actually seeing our squares actually start to approach a point which what we call midpoint. So they are past that match head square and are developing. So probably in the next week or so, we'll start to see those first candles appear before we hit bloom. We're also starting to see our second position squares, and on these plants, that second position is anywhere from pinhead to match head. And so we're really starting to see some very nice development starting on these plants and really starting to see a good yield potential set forth.